The sun beat down on the cracked earth, baking the sparse vegetation into brittle husks. Elias squinted, his eyes the color of a winter sky, scanning the distant horizon for any sign of a dust devil, a telltale swirl that might hint at a change in the relentless weather. His lips were chapped, cracked like the land itself, and his throat ached with a persistent thirst. He shifted in the saddle of his weary mare, Daisy, the leather groaning under his weight. 3 days without a proper water source, and the last town, Redemption Gulch, felt like a lifetime ago. The only sound was the rhythmic creak of the saddle and the distant, mocking cry of a hawk circling high above. He adjusted the brim of his sweat-stained Stetson, a futile attempt to block the oppressive glare. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest, for water, for anything but this endless, parched journey. Daisy stumbled, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Elias dismounted, his legs stiff, and gently patted her neck. "Easy, girl," he murmured, his voice hoarse. He checked her hooves, dry and caked with dust. The canteen, now barely holding a few drops, clinked emptily against his hip. This was the territory of the Ghost River, a legend whispered among the old-timers, a place where rivers vanished, leaving behind only dry beds and broken hopes. His last mapping expedition for the railroad had led him deeper than intended, lured by the promise of untapped silver veins that turned out to be nothing more than fool's gold. Now, the biggest vein he needed to tap was a vein of water. He remembered Martha's parting words, her hand tight in his. "Come back to me, Elias. Always come back." The thought of her, her warm smile, and the cool shade of their porch kept a flicker of determination alive in his weary soul. A distant glint caught his eye, a faint shimmer on the rippling heat waves. He shielded his eyes, his heart giving a small, hopeful thump. It was too steady, too precise to be a mirage. Could it be a settlement? Or perhaps just another cruel trick of the desert sun? He led Daisy forward, each step a deliberate effort, the coarse sand grating under his worn boots. The air grew heavier, thick with an almost palpable silence, broken only by the rasp of his own breathing. He thought of the stories, the grim tales of lone travelers swallowed by the unforgiving desert, their bones picked clean by buzzards. He wasn't about to become one of them, not after all he had endured, not with Martha waiting. As they drew closer, the glint resolved into the weathered facade of a dilapidated saloon, its sign, the last chance, swinging precariously in the almost imperceptible breeze. A few other ramshackle buildings, leaning at odd angles, formed a semblance of a town. No smoke rose from any chimneys, no voices carried on the wind. It was a ghost town, frozen in time, yet the saloon door stood ajar. A wave of unease washed over Elias. Why would a saloon, even an abandoned one, have its door open in such a desolate place? He gripped the worn handle of his Colt revolver, his thumb brushing the hammer. Caution was a lifeline in these lands, often the only one. He pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light piercing through the grimy windows. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of old whiskey, tobacco, and something else, something vaguely metallic. The bar was scarred, a few overturned chairs lay scattered, and an unlit lantern hung from the ceiling. A piano in the corner sat silent, its keys yellowed and chipped. It was as if everyone had simply walked away, leaving behind their lives in a hurry. Then he saw it, a faded map tacked to the wall behind the bar, half hidden by a tattered curtain. It depicted the local area, meticulously drawn, with a faint, almost imperceptible X marked near a winding line labeled Dry Gulch. He moved towards the map, his boots stirring up clouds of dust with every step. The metallic scent grew stronger. On the bar, amidst shattered glass and empty bottles, lay a single, tarnished silver locket. He picked it up, his fingers tracing the engraved initials, E.M. His blood ran cold. Elias and Martha. A chilling coincidence or something far more sinister? He flipped the locket open. Inside, a faded photograph of a woman with kind eyes stared back at him. It wasn't Martha, but the resemblance, the shared initial, sent a jolt of fear through him. This place, this locket, it felt like a warning, a premonition. He slipped the locket into his pocket, a strange sense of obligation settling over him. As he studied the map, a creak from the back of the saloon shattered the oppressive silence. Elias spun around, drawing his Colt. His heart hammered against his ribs. A figure emerged from the shadowy doorway leading to what looked like a storeroom. It was a man, gaunt and pale, his clothes ragged, a haunted look in his eyes. He held a rusty pickaxe, his grip surprisingly firm. "Who are you?" the man rasped, his voice a dry whisper, like leaves skittering across the desert floor. Elias didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the man's right hand. It trembled slightly, but the pickaxe remained steady. "My name is Elias Vance," he finally said, his voice measured. "I'm a surveyor, lost my way." The man's eyes, deep set and weary, narrowed. "Lost your way, or looking for something?" he questioned, his voice laced with suspicion. "Only water," Elias replied, gesturing to his empty canteen, "and perhaps a way out of this dust bowl." The man grunted, a sound that seemed to hold both despair and a hint of dark humor. He lowered the pickaxe slowly, his gaze drifting to the locket now tucked into Elias's pocket. A flicker of recognition, or perhaps pain, crossed his face. "That locket," the man said, his voice barely audible. "Where did you find it?" He whispered, a tear tracing a clean path down his dusty cheek. "My Emma." He reached out, his hand shaking, and took the locket from Elias's outstretched palm. She wore this every day. He looked up, his eyes now filled with a profound sorrow. "My name is Silas. I used to run this place, before the sickness took everyone." Silas recounted his story, his voice gaining a weary strength as he spoke of his lost family, his lost town. A fever, swift and merciless, had swept through Redemption Gulch a few months prior, claiming nearly everyone. Emma, his wife, and their young son, Thomas, were among the first. He had stayed behind, burying the dead, clinging to the hope that some forgotten cure might surface, or perhaps just to die where his loved ones had perished. He pointed to the X on the map. "That's Dry Gulch. There's an old spring there, still flowing. It's too far for a man to walk, but if your mare has any strength left." Elias looked at Daisy, slumped outside, her head low. She was near collapse. He turned back to Silas. "Why did you stay?" he asked, a genuine question in his voice. "Why not leave this place?" Silas looked around the desolate saloon, his gaze lingering on the empty chairs, the silent piano. "Because," he said, his voice cracking, "there's nothing left for me out there. And here, I can at least remember them. And perhaps," he paused, his gaze meeting Elias's, "perhaps I can help someone else avoid the same fate." He pointed to a small, worn satchel near the bar. "There's a compass in there, and a few jerky strips, and some old maps. They might help you find the spring." Elias packed the meager supplies. The compass was a simple brass instrument, its needle swinging true. The jerky, though tough, promised sustenance. He felt a profound sense of gratitude towards Silas, a man who had lost everything, yet still offered what little he had. "Thank you, Silas," Elias said, his voice husky with emotion. "I won't forget this." Silas merely nodded, his eyes distant, lost in the shadows of his grief. As Elias turned to leave, Silas called out, "Be careful, Elias Vance. The desert takes more than just water. It takes hope." With renewed purpose, Elias led Daisy away from the last chance. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The knowledge of the spring, however distant, was a powerful elixir. He checked the compass, noting the direction Silas had indicated. The landscape stretched before him, an endless expanse of rock and sand, but now it felt less hostile. He imagined the cool, clear water washing away the dust and despair. He thought of Martha, her patience, her unwavering belief in him. He had to make it back, for her, for them. The journey to Dry Gulch was arduous, every step a test of endurance. Daisy, sensing the urgency in Elias, pushed herself harder than he thought possible. The jerky provided just enough energy to keep them moving. Elias navigated by the compass, occasionally checking the tattered maps Silas had provided. The terrain shifted from flat, sandy plains to rocky inclines, then back to stretches of thorny scrub. The air grew cooler as night approached, bringing with it a deceptive sense of relief. He knew the desert nights could be brutally cold, and he searched for a sheltered spot to rest. He found a small overhang, a natural indentation in a rocky outcrop. He unsaddled Daisy, carefully brushing the sand from her coat. He shared the last of the jerky with her, rationing it carefully. He huddled under his worn blanket, the stars, bright and numerous in the unpolluted desert sky, seeming to mock his isolation. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by visions of Silas, his mournful eyes, and the ghost of Redemption Gulch. He dreamt of Martha, her voice calling his name, a beacon in the vast darkness. He woke before dawn, stiff and aching, but with a renewed resolve. The spring. He had to reach the spring. The final leg of the journey was the most challenging. The land became increasingly barren, the rocks sharp and unforgiving. The sun climbed higher, relentless in its assault. Daisy's steps grew heavy, each one a testament to her dwindling strength. Elias walked beside her, his hand on her neck, whispering words of encouragement. He scanned the horizon desperately, searching for any sign of a dip in the terrain, a cluster of green, anything that would indicate the presence of water. Doubt, a creeping vine, began to coil around his heart. Had Silas been mistaken? Was this another cruel mirage? Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a faint green shimmer appeared in the distance. Not the shimmering haze of heat, but the vibrant green of living foliage. His heart leapt. He urged Daisy forward, a new surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. The air grew noticeably cooler, and the faint murmur of running water reached his ears. It was real, Dry Gulch. He pushed through a thicket of brush, and there it was, a small, clear spring bubbling from the rocks, forming a shallow pool. Lush green grasses grew around its edges, a vibrant oasis in the desolate landscape. Elias knelt, dipping his hands into the cool, life-giving water. He drank deeply, long draughts that soothed his parched throat, washing away the dust and fatigue. Daisy, whinnying softly, pushed her muzzle into the water, drinking her fill. He splashed water on his face, feeling the grime of the journey melt away. The relief was profound, a tangible weight lifting from his shoulders. He felt alive again, truly alive, for the first time in days.
He set up a small camp near the spring, knowing they would need a full day of rest before continuing their journey. As the sun set, Elias looked at the locket in his hand. Emma, Silas's Emma, a tragic tale in a land full of them. But Silas's act of kindness, his willingness to share what little he had saved Elias's life. He knew he could not forget this place or the man who had helped him. This journey, this brush with death, had changed him. He understood now the true value of water, of life, and of human connection in the vast, indifferent wilderness. The silver locket, a symbol of loss for Silas, became a symbol of hope for Elias, a reminder of the kindness that could still be found in the harshest of lands. The next morning, refreshed and rehydrated, Elias packed his meager belongings. Daisy, her coat gleaming from a good drink, seemed to have regained some of her former vigor. He took one last look at the spring, committing its location to memory. He would mark it on his next survey map, a hidden blessing for any lost traveler. He also thought about Silas, alone in the Last Chance Saloon. He decided he would find a way to let people know about Silas's generosity, perhaps send help, or at least word, to the isolated man. It was the least he could do. He turned Daisy's head eastward, towards civilization, towards Martha. The journey back was still long, but the fear that had gnawed at him was gone, replaced by a quiet determination. He rode with a lighter heart, the vast expanse of the desert no longer feeling like an enemy, but a challenging companion. The sun, once a relentless tormentor, now felt like a warm promise of a new day. He knew the trail would still test him, but he also knew he possessed the resilience to face it. Days later, the distant silhouette of Redemption Gulch appeared on the horizon, its buildings slowly resolving into familiar shapes. Elias felt a surge of emotion, a mix of relief and profound gratitude. He had faced death and emerged stronger. He had found a hidden spring and, more importantly, a connection to a man who had lost everything but still chose kindness. As he rode into town, the first person he saw was Martha, standing on their porch, her hands shielding her eyes as she scanned the road. Her face, at first drawn with worry, lit up with unbridled joy as she recognized him. She ran towards him, her arms open, her voice a joyous cry. He dismounted, pulling her into a tight embrace, burying his face in her hair. Her scent, familiar and comforting, filled his senses. "You came back," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you would." Elias held her close, feeling the warmth of her body, the steady beat of her heart. "Always, Martha," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Always." He would tell her about Silas, about the spring, about the locket, but for now, he simply held her, thankful for the dust that had almost claimed him, for it had also led him home. The desert had taken its toll, leaving its mark on his skin and in his memory, but it had also given him a deeper understanding of survival, of human endurance, and of the enduring power of hope and connection in the untamed lands.